In my last video, I promised a video about the multi-fun plugin and going through the code. But I want to back up a step and do more of a hello world kind of video, something a little bit simpler. This is a little more complex than a hello world, so hopefully it's interesting enough, but simple enough that you get started and get an idea of how this plugin development works for clightning. I'm using the GLightning library, which is a library for creating plugins for clightning. Now the GLightning has two variables that I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using a plugin object, which is this plugin, which is going to be the plugin itself, and then there's lightning, which is for the RPC interface. And what we're going to do that for is to get the config so we know what network we're on, which is important for when you're deriving your keys. So what this does, it derives your xpub and your xpriv and spits them out through an RPC command. A lot of people are asking for that, and I came across how to do all this when developing the other plugin, so I figured I'd make this plugin, and it's a better starting point, so let's just go through it. Basically, when you start a plugin, you call this new plugin command, and then you provide a callback function to it. So the callback function onInit is where we're going to get started. So let's just go to that. onInit, you see down here, it gives you some parameters when you call it the plugin itself, and some options and the configuration. What we're using here is a configuration. The options, we're not using any options, and that's your command line options, and we're just ignoring that for this plugin. That can be useful, like for example, I have a remote RPC plugin, and you can pass in the credentials as your arguments so that you can connect to remotely. But in this case, we really don't need options, so we're going to skip over for that. But we are using the config, and it gives us the lightning directory, and that's where our secret lives. So since we're trying to derive our keys here, we need to know where that secret is. So we're going to store that variable here. So once we have that stored, we can later on, when we're actually using the plugin, right now we're just initializing it, we can know where to find the secret. And this lightning, like I said, is an RPC, and so we start that up. It also uses a lightning directory, but also needs to know which file in that is your RPC file to talk to. And we're going to call this function list configs, which I'm creating up here because this is not part of the GLightning library, but it does give you access to this lightning.requests, so you can make any RPC calls that are, one, either not part of the GLightning library yet, or two, since plugins can add their own RPC commands, you can use that to make requests and build on top of other plugins. So we go down here, we're going to call this list config that I created with the parameters above, and it's going to tell me what network we're on, so we know which parameters to use for deriving the seed and the key. It's important to know what network we're on. So that's the initialize option, and that's where we get our directory from. So let's take a look at the structure here. What we have is this dump keys object. So whenever you're using the GLightning, you want to have an object which it has to exist. It can be an empty structure if there are no arguments passed in the command line. In this case, we're going to use a single argument. So if you had multiple arguments, you could just keep adding to the structure, and whatever order you create the structure, that's the order they're read in. They also can be key value pairs, or any type of JSON object, array of objects, so you would just have to have your structure match that. But we're just going to use a true or false as an argument to the command line. So that dump keys object is of a type RPC method, which requires it to provide a call method. It provides a name method, which is what you're actually going to call from the command line, in this case dump keys, and also a new method, which how to return the value, which is just an empty interface in this. So now that we have that particular object and it implements interfaces here in our register methods, which basically from our main we call that, we're calling register options. It's empty because we're not using any options. I have it there because maybe I want to disable the xpriv, I don't know, but anyway, the register methods is also called from the main, and we're going to come down and we're going to use that dump keys object. We're going to add some description values to it. The usage tells you what kind of command line, so you can see the include priv is optional inside the brackets, that's standard convention, and then we register it. So the bread and butter is the call. Anytime you make an RPC command, this call gets called and the object itself gets populated with whatever values. Right here we call this object M. I don't know why I used M, but down here we can use the command line arguments that are automatically filled into that object. So anyway, we got our Lightning directory on our init, and we're going to open our HM secret file that is used for deriving the roots and the keys. So we make an array and read that in, and a byte array. And to create the seed, we call this HKDF, which is hash key derivation function, using a SHA-256 algorithm. That secret we just read in. The salt we're creating here, which required by CLightning, it's just a byte array of 0 value, and another byte array, which is just the string turned into a byte array, BIP32 seed. And we make an array B, and we read that in our seed into B. So now that value B is used in our create new master in our network, which, you know, we're on reg test now, but that could be mainnet testnet. And so once we have our base key, our derivation path is M00. So I'm going to get a child here, and then I'm going to have my master key, which will be the child of that, so M00. And we're always going to use the public key. So I have once I have my master key, neuter it will give me my public key. My dump key result, which I'll just hover over it and let you see that. It's your xpriv and xpub. The xpriv omit on empty since it's an optional variable, but always pub, so pub is getting at it here. And now we look at that variable that's been passed in, and if it's true, well, we're going to return the xpriv also. So we return that value in the form of that structure, and it automatically gets turned into the JSON by the GLightning library. So I think that's pretty much it. Let's go over to our command line and see it in action. If I call dump keys without passing anything, I only get my xpub. If I call it with a value of true, you can see, as expected, I get my xpriv with that. There's also some new features being worked on CLightning I want to mention, which may be useful here, but you can dynamically load and unload plugins. So I may make this, which it might make sense for a plugin like this, to where, oh, it's available, but you don't always want to have it running. You can load it, get your key information, and unload it. But that's a topic for the future. I hope this is helpful and gets you an overview, a better understanding of how you can create CLightning plugins, and hopefully get you excited to maybe create your own. And thanks for watching.